Ardha Chandrasana is a pose that's really hard to adjust because it's a one-legged balancing pose. So typically I do more verbal adjusting in it, but I do adjust the back leg and I'll show you. But this video is really the yummy adjustment is going to be focused around Chopasana in Ardha Chandrasana, which is a great way to open the top arm, shoulder, and hip flexor of the lifted leg. Hero's going to take Ardha Chandrasana. And again, before I adjust anything, I want to try to align my student in the foundational posture, which is Ardha Chandrasana, beforehand. Now, a lot of students, because they're balancing, their standing leg foot ends up turned in. And what's bad about that is that your stabilizing muscle, the outer hip and the quadricep, doesn't really engage that well in that position. So typically I can say, put your top hand down, get your standing leg foot to point forward, then reach the top hand back up. A block underneath that bottom hand works as well. I want to make sure that the quad's working, that the outer hip is pulling back. Now that lifted leg too, a lot of times do a little bit of a back bend. A lot of times this is happening, the lifted leg is drifting. I can just verbally adjust by saying draw the ribs and the navel in. That should bring the top leg into the right position. And if it doesn't, one hand on the standing leg hip, drawing it back as I take the other hand on the lifted leg heel. And I'm pulling towards one another, okay? Go ahead and change legs so I can show them from behind. This is much like my standing splits adjustment, just in a different position. So again, one hand on the standing leg hip, the other hand, before I do anything else, I'm placing the hands on the lifted leg heel, and then I'm pulling them towards one another. Well, really the pulling is going on the standing leg hip, and there's more of a rooting or a pushing of the lifted leg heel into the hip, or the femur into the hip. Okay. Rest, shake it out, and we'll show Chopasana. So I feel like that is a really good position for Chopasana. A lot of students will externally rotate a little too much, and you'll see what I mean. Go ahead and come into Ardha Chandrasana, right leg lifted. Good, so with this one, I want to try to keep, because I want the front body to open, so I'm not going to really let the lifted leg knee lift up too high. So I come in, I stand from behind, and I'm just bracing his lifted leg outer hip so he can lean a little bit. Then I take my hands, one hand to the quadricep of the lifted leg, the other hand to the shoulder, and you bend your lifted leg knee, and I guide the foot to the hand and the hand to the foot. And whoop, you okay? And even if they don't connect, that's fine. If they do connect, that's fine too. And again, notice how his knee is lifted. I push it down a bit, and then I pull his shoulder open and his knee behind me. That feel good? Nice. And then slowly release. And put your hand down and fold. That should feel good. Nice. I'll show you from the front. Try not to make him lose his balance. One more time. Left leg lifted. I stand to the side and just gently let my hip brace his hip. From here, he bends his knee and he begins to reach his hand behind. I take my top hand to the shoulder tip, my other hand right above the knee, and just gently push them back. Does that feel good? And of course, I've asked already, no injuries in the hip flexors or the shoulders. And my pressure is not so hard. It's actually more of a guiding into a direction. If I feel like, do you need more? And he says no, then I let him out. Folds and down. Enjoy.